Gendo Ikari, the bastard king, the commander of Nerve, Shinji's father. Probably one of the more interesting characters in this series, largely because we know pretty much nothing about him. Um, his motivations, his plans, his goals, we don't really know anything about them. Instead, we're kind of given a number of philosophical statements, many of which seem kind of contradictory or difficult to unravel. Uh, his relationship with other characters in the series remains really mysterious, but what makes him interesting is that he, despite being so mysterious and so difficult to really get to the heart of, is such a driving force in Evangelion in all its incarnations. So, where to begin? Gendo Ikari's past is kind of shrouded in mystery. From what we're able to understand, he was a extremely troubled youth who came from a family with an abusive father. Whether or not his father was like him, we're not really sure. It's never really explained what his father was like. It's only mentioned briefly. He had a very bad reputation and was regarded as a troublemaker until he met Yui Akari, who he would eventually marry and very interestingly take her name. Taking her name is one of the very few things we know about him. It's an extremely unusual occurrence for a man to take a woman's name, both in Western countries and in Japan. And it tends to symbolize to most people that he really hated his past and childhood and wanted nothing to do with his father. Also, that he truly loved his wife. Although even this, there's some controversy over, because when he first got together with Yui, people say it was because of her connection to Sele. Yes, even back in the day, Yui had a close connection to Sele, and she was perhaps sought out by Gendo initially for that. He appears to have fallen in love with her, and that's one of the few things that really seems to be a constant in Gendo's life is his love for his wife Yui. That seems to really be the only thing we know for sure about him. His relationship with his son, though, is extremely confusing and complicated. If you really look at it, the two only interact a half dozen times or so over the series. When they first meet at the funeral, when he tells Shinji good job, and when Shinji threatens to destroy the base. Other than that, the two never really seem to talk to each other. Most of their conversations happen in the first half of the series, and in the last couple episodes, they don't even directly speak to one another. The final thing really Shinji says about his father is that his father betrayed him, and he refers to Kwaru as betraying him just like his father did. How does Gendo feel towards his son? We don't really know. Um, did he view his son as just a tool? Did he care about his son at all? We don't. It's hard to tell. It depends if one accepts Enta Evangelion as being canon or not, and whether or not one says the original ending was the canon ending and Enta Evangelion is is an alternative ending. If they're one and the same, are they different? It's very much open to interpretation. If one does accept Enta Evangelion, in his last moments or his last thought, more or less, Gendo Ikari reminisces that he pushed Shinji away because he didn't know how to deal with other people and he just believed that he would hurt him, just like his father had hurt him. And that perhaps pushing Shinji away would allow Shinji to grow up to be a better person, unlike what happened to him, because the presence of his father corrupted him and made him the man he was. So he might have thought not raising Shinji would spare Shinji that and make him a better person, which I suppose it did given the job he did raising Rei, which was absolutely horrendous. So did he care about Shinji? It's an interesting question. In fan fiction, it's very divided. About half the people say he does love his son, but he remains dedicated to the betterment of the world and the betterment of man. and his son just must always come second. Some people think that by pushing Shinji away from himself, um, he's protecting Shinji from Seilei, and if Seilei ever figured out that he actually did care about his son, they would kidnap him and try to use him as a tool. We do know that when asked to surrender Shinji to the Seilei committee, he instead sent Ritsuko. Whether or not that's because Shinji was a tool or that he had a genuine affection for his son is difficult to say. I guess he feels conflicted about his son because his son is a product of himself and he hates and despises himself, but he's also a project of Yui, who he loves deeply. And indeed, Shinji kind of looks a fair bit like Yui. He does look kind of like a male version of him. Her. A lot of people like to try and draw parallels between Gendo and Shinji, but I really don't see any parallels between them. Um, they don't really seem that similar to me. Um, I don't know. People will say like Gendo is what Shinji will be when he grows up, but I don't know because Gendo doesn't really have a lack of confidence. He doesn't really have a inability to deal with people. He can't relate to people, but he doesn't have any problem scaring them, intimidating them, or showing confidence around them. Where Shinji's the opposite. He can relate to other people, he's just too nervous to do so. If anything, he kind of reminds me a bit more of Asuka than Shinji. Um, Someone who hides his inner darkness with a confident exterior. But the truth of the matter is, we really just don't know very much about him. Was his ultimate motivation just to be with Yui again? Did he have some sort of grander vision for humanity? Um, was it all about giving his son uh, the best life possible by making him basically God incarnate? It's incredibly difficult to say because for every time we have him say something like death creates nothing to the Sele committee, you also have him talking about how the world needs to be destroyed because it's consumed by sin. And he definitely seems to be at odds with Fiyusuke, whose philosophy is more that humanity is worthwhile. He seems to despise humanity, but at the same time he despises Sele. So, does Gendo have some big um, plan for humanity? Does he even care about humanity? Does he care about his son? Is it all about him being with Yui again? In the end, when it seems he doesn't get to be with her again, although there's many interpretations of the scene. Some people think that he did join instrumentality and that was just the manifestation of his guilty conscience. He didn't seem that disappointed by the fact that the unit bit his head off. Um, with regards to Ritsuko, did he actually care about her? It's an interesting question. I think it's certainly possible because she is in some ways like Yui, but it's and as I keep going through him as a character, I keep saying we don't know, we aren't sure. His motivations, regardless of the incarnation, remain largely a mystery. How he felt about the people in his life, with the possible exception of Yui, remains also a constant mystery. How he felt about Sele, what his ultimate goals were, never came to fruition. It's a bit different in the manga, but I didn't really read the manga past like the three quarters point or whatever. I wasn't a huge fan of it, so maybe it's a bit different there. But Gendo Ikari remains a mystery, someone with very few canon appearances and very little really that we know for sure about him, but someone who had immense impact on the show and whose presence is always felt. This is Argent Templar signing out.